Welcome to our world. Won't you come on in? Waiting just for you. Welcome to our world.
Are you recording already? Your mic's not on. This week in history.
When did I mute it? Did I mute it for the whole end of the last podcast?
I hope so. Lord, I
had nothing good to say anyway. You hope I muted for the entire podcast.
Maybe that's why people think I cut you off. Because
yeah, because my mic's muted.
You're just muted the whole time. Are you focused? I feel like you're not focused.
2 seconds.
One,
yeah, whatever.
2. This one, I think, will be fun.
The anticipation is always like...
Okay, because, well, for you it is. Keep in mind, the episode title is already there, so the viewers already know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't care about for the listeners.
We don't care about our listeners.
The listeners.
The what?
I said for the listeners.
Bureaucracy.
Like, I can't say the person's name. I probably shouldn't. Voicemail message.
A voicemail message?
Never mind. Nobody would get it.
Okay.
Actually, one person might get it. One, maybe two. A couple would get it, but I'm not going to say it.
You can. I don't.
Never mind. Go ahead. No.
Okay, fine. Anyway, honestly, okay, here's the thing. I can't believe that it took us this long to get to this subject, considering the name of our podcast is Existential Crises. Does that give you a clue as to what I would like to talk about today? No. Okay. I didn't think so. My question for you today is actually super simple. I'm going to punch you in the face. Get that look off your face. Oh. My question for you today is extremely simple. Are you ready for it?
Go ahead.
What is the meaning of life?
This is the subject?
Yep.
Wow. Oh, well, thanks for giving me a lot of time to think about this. Of course, I've had like almost 62 years now to think about it.
You can't tell me you've never thought about this before.
I must have a pretty full life because I don't spend a lot of time thinking about this. But since you asked.
Or do you have a really
empty life?
Shallow life.
Shallow. That's the word.
I'm off the deep end.
I think the meaning of life is a couple things.
Okay.
Knowledge, gaining knowledge. Or maybe the better way to put it is what makes life worth living, right?
That's not what I asked. Those are two completely different things.
The meaning of life. Well, life is a 4-letter word. I assume we're talking about biological life.
You're spiraling.
It's the opposite of dead.
Come on, seriously.
I don't know. I mean,
you can talk about...
I'm going to be all depressed when this episode's over. Why?
You can talk about... What was the other thing you just said? Things that...
Makes life worth living.
You can talk about that, but that's ultimately not the question. But you can mention those things.
You actually said this to me a long time ago. I forget exactly how you put it, but you said pretty much, and I know you didn't say exactly like this. It was more eloquent, I'm sure.
I'll reword it.
More adequate. No. It was like, kind of like everything. Life is sort of like one distraction to the next. And I know you didn't say it like that and didn't even mean it so much like that. But like, you need something at any given point in life that sort of drives you.
Right.
Like, it could be a project. It could be like, oh, we're putting in a new bathroom. So that's your big thing. You're excited about the new bathroom. Oh, it's going to be Christmas in a week. You're excited about that. Some people, if you're really into work, it could be a work project or work in general. It could be, there's a new baby on the way. It's kind of like when you get to the point where you don't have any of that, then it's like very depressing. It's very like, Why should I go on?
See, okay, see, my issue with those examples, and yes, I do remember saying something like that to you at one point. Again, I don't think I worded it like that, but
No, not at all. It was much more eloquent.
but here's because those examples that you gave are all about future events. You're not talking about actually just
enjoying
the moment that you're in. You're not talking about enjoying Christmas. You're talking about Christmas being a week ahead and having something to look forward to. What?
Yeah, but I think that's the thing. It's kind of like when you're on vacation. So when you're looking forward to something, is that more fun than the actual event?
I think a lot of people would argue that yes, that the anticipation of something and just knowing that you have something good coming in the future is a lot of times more exciting than the actual event itself, which in part is an issue because that's just you building up your expectations maybe for that and then not being able to reach those expectations.
Like, yeah, because in your mind, it's always better than probably it actually is, right? So like, you have a hamburger or a cheeseburger. You're putting the Heinz ketchup on.
Sponsored today's podcast, sponsored
is the
by Heinz.
anticipation of the taste of the ketchup better than actually when you've actually made the sandwich?
I mean,
and not everyone will understand that, but that used to be Heinz's thing. Their commercial would be anticipation.
Oh, I don't understand that.
I'm going to show it to you after.
That's okay.
I will.
I agree to an extent with that stuff. But so again, I think it's interesting that you responded that way with all future events and not act, because that's a huge thing that people say you don't live in the moment. Wow.
No, it's funny that because I was actually thinking while I was saying that, I was going to think, so that was part of it. Then the other part is family, spending time together, right?
Sure.
And again, it's never as good.
That's just rude.
But the funny thing is, the same thing happens after the fact, right? Like you look back on Christmas 3 years ago or Christmas, right? And you always think like it was better. And in some ways, obviously, you could say, well, it was. But it's always in your mind. It's kind of like normally you remember the extremes. You remember the really good things or the really bad things.
Yeah.
So probably things that were not great, you imagine them worse than what they actually were.
Right.
And things that were really good or things that were good, you imagine them as really great. Like, you know?
Yeah. That's just like how the human brain works.
Which is fine.
I think okay. So let me explain why this topic came to mind. I think, a couple months ago, I had written this down as like a potential episode topic, but I didn't really have any kind of basis for it or anything. And, it's just an existential question that people ask or whatever. But then, and I don't want this to be solely focused on this topic, but on the topic that I'm about to say right now, but this is what made me think of it. When you mentioned the other day about whatever interview or thing you saw about we would reach a point where robots would be doing everything and we would just be getting UBI and we would all just be able to do whatever we want, right?
Right, universal basic income.
Universal basic income, yeah. So I'm thinking about this and then I'm thinking about episode topics and I'm like, okay, so let's say, and again, I don't want this to be specifically about AI or whatever. We can talk about that more in a future episode.
That makes it more relevant almost.
It makes it more relevant, and because that kind of future that you're talking about is, so because a lot of people find fulfillment in their jobs, in their work, whatever they're doing. That's how they feel they were put here on this earth to do this one thing. You know what I mean?
That's where their value is.
Right, exactly. And so your whole point in that conversation was we would reach a point where nobody had to work because we would have robots, they would do all the work, and we would just get to reap the benefits. And I'm sitting over here and I'm like, okay, but then if I don't have anything that and maybe this is just like how rich people feel all the time, I don't know. If I don't need to make a living, what then is my purpose? Not that, see the issue with that though, that assumes that my purpose is to have a job and make a living in the first place, which I'm not really suggesting,
Right.
but I'm just
But
saying
some
a lot
people-
of people would say
Right.
that. And so if you don't have that need, then what do you do? And what is your purpose?
I think the whole thing brings up a good point. So everyone has to feel value, right? And
Mhm.
some people do that through their job. Some people do that through their interaction with other people. Like some people are people, right?
Right.
They, they're that person who's most people like these type of people that are really genuinely concerned about what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
And it's not fake. They literally care from the time they wake up. They know what's going on, all the people around them in their lives. And that's their value,
Yeah.
right? In their personal, they kind of internalize that.
Mom.
Yeah, I know. I knew that was kind of what I was thinking too. But some people, it could be maybe they're really good at sports and it's a specific sport and that's their value. Some people are just so into money and into the esteem of, which I think all of that can be pretty shallow.
But so my thing is, all of these, there are a bunch of different, examples you just gave for how people feel differently. But in general, so do we all have separate meanings? Because I'm thinking about like billions of years from now, when Earth doesn't exist anymore, right? And it's like, well, what was the whole purpose of us being here? What did and I'm not trying to get negative here and pessimistic and all that and say, what is any of this for, since we're all going to be gone eventually and all. I'm not trying to say that either, but it's like you think about things, even things that people remember, like things that happened hundreds, thousands of years ago that people still talk about. You could argue, well, those people obviously found their meaning and found their purpose because we still talk about them to this day.
But at the time, did they? I mean, at the end of their life, did they feel like?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And that could be pretty depressing, right? Think about it. Think about the fact that if you go back just 100 years, the vast majority of those people lived their lives and they felt like they had value, and they're gone now.
Yeah.
And that's why one of the things is I would find it really hard to be an atheist or completely not religious, because then I would feel like, what is my value? Because once you're gone, you're gone. And then to me, that really would be depressing. I think part of it plays into that too, how you look at the universe and how you look at if there is a God and all of that, if there's an afterlife,
Sure. And so I think that that's one argument, the main argument probably that people would make. I know a lot of people that would make this argument is that the meaning of life, your whole purpose is you're here to honor God and serve him and, respect him and all that. And that's your only reason for being here. And if you're religious, I think it kind of just ends there. And you're like, well, yeah, that's the end of it. But if you're not religious, like you said, then it's like, literally, what am I doing? And even if you are religious, maybe you feel that, but only to an extent, because what?
No, I was just going to say, and I think whether you are religious or I think there's different levels of that, right? There are people that are extremely religious, and there are people, I probably the vast majority of people that are kind of like, they believe there's a God, but they're not, overtly religious. And I think part of that comes back to kind of hoping that, there's a God, that there is more than this,
right? Right, exactly.
Because if there isn't more than this, then it's kind of like, just get whatever you can get. And
I know, that sounds awful.
I know. And it gets back to and I don't want to because we talked about, atheism versus being religious and all that. And this isn't about that.
Yeah.
In some ways it gets back to that, but so I think it's sort of related. Like everyone, you figure if there's a single question that has been asked from the beginning of time, that's the question.
This is it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
what is the meaning of life? Why am I here?
Sorry. I think it's interesting because we had mentioned on another episode about, there are writers and musicians and a bunch of people that their work wasn't even famous until after they died.
Yep.
And so it's like, did they even feel that? Did they still feel a sense of fulfillment because they were doing what they loved to do?
Right.
part of fulfillment, you have to think, especially with something like a popular industry, like a public industry, is the recognition. And if you
Right.
never get that, is it the same? I was actually listening to a podcast this morning where they said about, what movie do you say that I should watch at Christmas that I haven't watched?
It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life. That at the time was not a popular movie. And it wasn't until like the 80s that
Yep.
people actually started watching it and making it a Christmas movie.
Yep, when it entered the public domain.
Yes. And so it's like, did those people still feel a sense of fulfillment?
I think
And
that, I mean, at
am I
least-
suggesting that that's the meaning of life? A sense of fulfillment?
I think so. Oh, well, and like Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed, they were successful actors, actresses. They were successful anyway. So probably that one movie maybe didn't mean a lot to them. But I don't know, the writer or
No,
the
it
other
did,
people
though.
involved.
That was part of the podcast that I was just listening to.
They
Who was
were-
the guy?
Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart. So that's the main one, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember all of it necessarily because I was only half listening, but because he was also in the army, right? Or
Yeah. I think
he was in the army, and he had PTSD and all this stuff. But so he actually, long story short, he got this, and he thought that part of the reason he wanted to do it was because he thought that a lot of people would relate and would really love it. And so he was a
Oh.
big advocate for doing this because he could see this as a huge thing, like pretty much what it is today, or like what it was in the 80s and all
Yeah.
that. And so for him, that, it doesn't specifically say how he felt. I'm sure I could look it up
Right.
and all that, but that must have been extremely disappointing
Disappointing,
thinking
yeah.
that you're going to have this huge hit
Yeah.
and nobody else is on that same level.
I think here's the thing too. I think there's a good chance that will happen with our podcast. Long after we're gone,
Long
it will
after
finally
we're gone.
become extremely popular.
I think it'll become extremely popular once you actually upload the videos that I've asked you to upload 1,200 times.
If it was just video, I have to create the videos. I should just do reenactments on my own.
I mean, if that's what you're trying to do, maybe
I'll
that's
do like
your
the two of us
purpose in
talking.
life.
I'll just turn my head one way.
Maybe that's your
I'll look
purpose.
like a Muppet. I'll look like a Muppet. That's what I'm gonna do.
I just don't. Okay, but let's go back to what you had suggested originally, because I was over here talking about work and all that, and because part of I always start like 12 sentences in my head and I don't know which one to go with. And it stresses me out. I have too many thoughts all the time. Part of my life goal, I guess you could say, and I don't want to go into too much detail about this. I think I've mentioned this to you about having, I don't know the right way to say this. I'm not
Cheetos?
selling it too well.
Oh, never mind.
A company, or not company is not the right word, like an organization, an economic organization that helps underdeveloped areas develop themselves. And so we've talked about this before, how, well, I don't think we have on the podcast, but long story short, like Tom's Shoes. I know I've told you this before. The company where you buy, I don't know if they still do it, where you buy a pair of shoes and they give a pair of shoes to a child in need somewhere around the world.
Yes.
What?
No, I'm very skeptical of these kinds of things.
Okay. Well, that's fine. A lot of people are like, oh my gosh, that's so good that a company is doing this. Like, that's such a generous thing to do. It is horrendous. That is not because it's not a kind thought, but because it ruins part of the economic stability of wherever they're sending these things. Because, for example, you think about it, wherever they're sending these shoes, if you are a shoemaker, you have no purpose anymore.
yeah.
Because everybody in the village is getting free shoes every 5 seconds or every 2 weeks or
So
whatever.
that's what you're saying.
And
It
so
hurts.
it's like, well, now I'm going out of business. Now I can't sell my shoes anymore.
Okay, but it hurts the economic stability, but it helps the personal stability because now they have shoes.
So anyway, so my part of my life goal, I guess you could say, is to have some kind of organization that focuses on not, and I mean, there's this whole, I always go off on too many tangents. There's this whole, is that a complaint? Have you heard that from people too?
No, not yet.
You will after this episode.
That one hasn't gotten to my desk yet.
Is that teach a man or give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. There are actually a lot of people that disagree with that, and it's a whole thing. But in general,
Oh, we have to
whatever.
have a. I
No,
got
we
to
can
hear
talk about
that
this later.
because, like,
But
okay, yes, because common sense really, we need to debate common sense. It's like,
but
no,
in general, so my thing would be the people wherever you're sending these shoes, those people don't need shoes. What they need, and this is obviously going to sound really like exaggerated. What they need
they
is
need shoes that will match their outfit.
no,
is
they
the
need
problem.
a stable economy. Okay. And so what I would want to do in an ideal scenario when I have enough money and all that stuff and enough, resources is instead of just throwing money or clothes or, food, whatever at underdeveloped places, actually sending a team in that helps those underdeveloped places create a stable economy that they can then reinforce themselves. So for me, I think something like that.
Like a sweatshop.
Would you stop? You're making a joke out of this. What's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of life, Jim? Go ahead.
The sweatshop.
Sweatshops, great. This is a wonderful Why am I here?
Though, and finish your thought if you're not finished. Seriously, I agree with everything you just said.
Because my whole point is, for me, having that goal, and I'm thinking about what is the meaning of life, and at the end of my life and all that stuff. If I could accomplish that, I would feel such a sense of fulfillment, like I had helped other people and I had done good things for the world to like help it carry on and be a better place. And so for me, that's how I see the meaning of life, to pretty much leave the world a better place than you found it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right. I'm
Mic
just
drop.
glad I found it. I'm happy with that.
Jokes. We have jokes for days.
You made me think of something that's a little bit off subject, but
okay.
No, with the idea of doing what you just did or what you just said, you you basically improve the economy of that area, right? Somewhere there was a comment at one point, not necessarily to do with the pod. I just remember seeing this, and it was to do with, like, for instance, you talk about child labor or something like that, or sweatshop someplace, something like that.
Which is not what I'm suggesting.
And you say, no, I know you're not. But let's say there's somewhere in China, or it could be wherever. It's kind of irrelevant where it is. But where it's either child labor or there's sweatshops or whatever. And you say, we're going to stop buying iPhones because of this. So here's the weird thing. Think about what happens. So now the economy of that area takes a nosedive. You haven't improved the situation. You've actually made it worse, because now the people that were working maybe in bad conditions now are not working, so they just can't eat. So everything is more complicated than maybe you would think at first, right? Like I know people who worked at Amazon that hated it, but at least it was a choice to work there or not to work there. If there were no other jobs, and you didn't have money and you couldn't eat and you had to work at Amazon and, not the best conditions, would you do it? Most people would, because if they have the choice between starving or having a crappy job, they'll take the crappy job and then be able to eat when they get home. So I don't know. I that's a little bit of a tangent, but the meaning of life is working like a dog so you can eat before you die.
That's what I think most people feel.
Should not be like that.
I fear, from everything I said, you really just grasped one part of it and you ran with it.
No, I'm saying I agreed with everything. I agree 100%.
You don't have to agree with me.
Said. No, but I do in this case. I think that's a good way to put it. Leave the world better than you entered it.
Right. Go ahead.
I think it's good that I was here.
Personally,
I haven't always cleaned up after myself.
No.
But
I think, because to kind of tie this back then to what initially made me think of this, what then in this future where AI and robots are doing all of the work, and my idea for this organization is no longer necessary, really, when you think about it. If the future is as ideal as people want to make it sound. Go ahead. What?
Yeah, well, the question is how, well, two things. I feel like eventually we're going to get there. So the one question is, well, how long? Is it 20 years from now? Is it 30 years from now? I don't think it's only 5 or 10 years from now, that's for sure. But we're going to be gradually heading toward that. And I think we should have a longer podcast just about that, because there's so much.
So do I.
Yeah, there's so many, like, I don't know, things that when you think about it, it's kind of complicated. But yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because initially, at least, you're still going to need people who say, well, we need this in this location, right? We need this type of business and it will help the economy or whatever.
Right.
Or it'll help supply these people with whatever they need. But at some point, that's the whole point. At some point, AI will be so good that it will have thought of that long before you ever thought of it.
And yeah.
And then is life just, you get up in the morning, you play Monopoly Go on your phone.
Like you're doing now. Well,
No,
because
no.
my point is, what then in this ideal future where I'm not needed to be there and say, do this and have this economic thing and all that, what then is my purpose? How in that future do I leave the world better than I found it? Is that just by being a kind person? What does that actually mean?
I think rather than look at it maybe as leave the world better than you found it, I think you have to break it down into individual moments. So in other words, even when we get to that point, you'll have a cat or a dog that loves you, right? And you will be that cat, that dog's whole world.
Mm-hmm.
And there'll be specific moments when there's that connection, right?
Right.
Obviously with other people, same thing. The reason I was thinking just of animals is, animals live obviously much shorter life than people do.
Right.
So during your life, you have that moment with animals, I don't know, maybe a dozen times, half dozen, whatever. And that becomes the meaning of life. Those individual, like, snapshots.
Right. Yep. Have you, do you need a tissue? They're right. Will you still have your Santa box on?
I think the listeners need tissues now.
No, they'll need tissues after I say what I'm about to say.
Okay.
You've heard the thing where it's like, for your pets, they are only part of your life. You have other things in your life. You go to work, you go to school, you do hang out with friends. They're only part of your life.
Yeah.
But for them, you are their entire life. It's all they know.
You know
Isn't
what,
that
though?
so
Do you
sad?
think? I mean, it is, but I wonder.
And it's really sad. I'm sorry to cut you off. It's really sad.
There it is.
For dogs, cats don't care about you. But for dogs, when you leave the house, every time you leave, they think you're never coming back.
Only because if you think about it, if you, like, let's say if you have a dog, you have one dog, from their perspective, you've kidnapped them and they're alone in the house, right?
That's why they're sad. They're not sad
if there
about
are
you
multiple,
leaving.
well, if there were multiple ones, I wonder when you're not there. But like the cats, we have 3 cats here in the house at any given time. When the 3 of them are together and we're not here, are they saying, to them or to us, they're just part of our life? But to them, we're their entire life.
I mean, obviously not, because that part's not true.
Well, because they can't speak English, but they could be like...
thinking it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they do.
I think it's funny that when you brought this conversation up initially about the AI and what the future looks like and all that, Nana brought up Wall-E and that scenario. Do you think that, and maybe we could save this conversation for the future follow-up AI conversation, but do you think, because if you think about it this way with regards to this specific podcast, it's like, what was their purpose then? It was literally just to
relaxation.
Eat and
like,
eating is the meaning of life.
Well, it's almost like if you're on a cruise.
Yeah, relaxation. That's interesting. That's an interesting
I like
thought.
that, though. I like relaxing.
How does that? Okay, because my immediate thought is, how does that give you fulfillment? But again, that's assuming that fulfillment is part of the meaning of life, and if it's not,
yeah, I mean, for me. Yeah, no, and I think it is. For me, part of fulfillment is learning. Like, I love
Right.
learning about new things. Like the other day, they're talking about the whole thing with Trump saying he wants Greenland and all that. So I don't even remember how I started this, but I sort of went down this rabbit hole of looking into Greenland map, looking up information about Greenland, and it's like so interesting. And then I was thinking, there have been very few people who've gone to the northern part of Greenland. Like there's an island, just off the coast of Greenland that's only a few hundred meters, like 300 by 200 or something like that. It's not very big at all, but it's considered the northernmost landmass in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking to myself, man, if you had unlimited time, unlimited money, like it would be so cool to go there to say that you were there. You obviously can't fly. There's not an airport anywhere near there.
Right.
It would be an adventure, obviously, but the idea of just visiting different places, learning about different places, it's just, to me, that's just really cool. Some people have no desire to do that, but I would love doing that,
Then do it. Why are you not doing it if that's part of the meaning of life?
I have to buy a good coat first.
Yep. Check back with us when you have one.
Yeah. Okay. That would be wild, though.
Maybe there just there is no meaning.
Really, Iceland should technically have been called Greenland, and Greenland should be called Iceland.
They did that on purpose so that people wouldn't bother them?
Yes, they did.
Yep.
Well, the other thing was Greenland, I forget who discovered it. Was it Leif Erikson, maybe? Well, anyway.
Sounds right.
No, whoever it was, he wanted to make it sound better than it was because he wanted them to start some, what do you call it, villages or not developments, what do you call them? Like pilgrimages, basically, there. And he was trying to sell it. So he was a salesman. So he was making it like it was really great. And there are just very limited areas along the southern part of Greenland where, yeah, you look and it would be green during the summer and all, but
there are only 5 total towns/cities in all of Greenland.
Yeah, the total population is only 56,000, and it's 3 times the size of Texas. I mean, think about that. Let's pause for a moment so everyone can think about it.
Do you think Texas is ever really going to leave the U.S.?
No.
They talk about it all the time.
No, I haven't heard them talk about it for a while now. They'll wait. If things stay the way they are, they'll wait until the next Democratic administration, and then they'll talk about it. Again.
All right. And that is their meaning of life. Have a great week, everyone.
I keep getting messages or something on my phone. Oh, my nose is itchy now.
Squirrel.
When your nose is itchy, does that mean someone's talking about you?
No.
It just means your nose is itchy.
Stop looking at your phone.
Text messages. I keep hearing it buzz.
Squirrel. What?
Okay. All right. So